Hey everyone, author MJ Gallagher here, and welcome back to Rebirth Revealed, a series presented and funded by KupoCon. This episode covers the details and lore you may have missed from Chapter 6, Fool's Paradise. Spoilers beyond this part of the game are minimal, but as always, please beware of likely spoilers for the original Final Fantasy VII, its remake, and the compilation in general. So let's hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and coast on in. Chapter 6 opens with a glorious sweeping shot of Costa del Sol, settling for a moment on the main masts of the Shinra 8 ferry, and some flags whose design and colours hint at being inspired by the Spanish national flag. Costa del Sol, of course, literally means Coast of the Sun in Spanish. As the passengers disembark the ship, Yuffie takes delight in the Hawaiian-style music and flower garlands known as leis, and pauses momentarily when she spots the Shinra middle manager holding a welcome sign. She may have been caught off guard by the characters on the sign, or is perhaps just surprised to see he survived the collapse of Midgar's Sector 7, because you can challenge him to a game of Fort Condor there in episode intermission. Cloud and the others, meanwhile, are greeted by Mayor Capono, alongside a trio of women that will play a small role in events to come. Despite the horrific mutations that occurred on the Shinra 8 during the night, some of the black-robed figures have made it to their destination. On the pier, however, they gather together and face north, with one occasionally mumbling the word reunion. I wonder if they feel like someone or something is calling them from that general direction. More on this later. The regional intel entry for Costa del Sol provides some interesting insight into the resort's past. It was once home to a string of fishing villages, but the Shinra company annexed the area from the Republic of Junon and redeveloped it as a tourist hotspot after the war. Seizing land and commercialising cultural traditions is nothing new to Shinra, as we saw in the original Final Fantasy VII with Wutai. As with most, if not all locations in Rebirth, Costa del Sol has been beautifully recreated, striking a perfect balance between new spots and faithfulness to the old game. There's iconic places such as the Villa, which previously belonged to President Shinra, and the player could purchase for 300,000 gil, or Bar del Sol, where Mookie and the bodybuilders of Wall Market have come to surf. I'll return to the relevance of this in due course. There are even references to the wider compilation, such as the large doorway that leads to Club Jewel. The establishment is currently closed for renovations, but it features during episode 4 of Before Crisis, where it's revealed to be a fight club that the Turks use to scout soldier candidates. The man in the black suit at the entrance may be a little nod to the Turks themselves, and he says Cloud should come speak to the king once the club reopens. In Before Crisis, the player must fight the king before rounding up the soldier potentials. Among them is a giant named Azul, who later becomes a Sviet of Deep Ground, and an enemy of Vincent Valentine during Dirge of Cerberus. One of my favourite callbacks in the chapter is finding Yuffie hanging around the burger van. If you recruit her before reaching Junon in the original game, the young ninja will be hired as a materia stall assistant while in Costa del Sol, and can be found beside the van on the corresponding corner. Approaching the girl in Rebirth, you'll overhear her humming her own theme tune, Descendant of Shinobi. As it happens, this is exactly what she's doing at the opening of the episode intermission DLC. I was also blown away by how the development team took the random ability to kick a soccer ball off Red 13 in the old Final Fantasy VII and expanded on it to produce the Run Wild minigame. It's just one of many examples of the attention to detail and depth of creativity from director Naoki Hamaguchi and his staff, as well as a cool payoff for the Red 13 soccer references I highlighted in my Chapter 3 video. Another minigame introduced in this chapter is the Pirates Rampage shooting range. Barrett is denied access because the amusement is for amateurs only, but the attendant suspects he uses firearms for a living, so Cloud takes over. Ironically, Cloud was previously a trooper in the Shinra army, and is even shown firing his rifle during episode 5 of Before Crisis. Elsewhere, the name of the group running the photography event during the Costa del Sol festivities is Estudio de la Luna. In Spanish, this translates as Study of the Moon, which is a deliberate contrast to the sun element of Costa del Sol. In Japanese culture, the moon can symbolise beauty, romance, or femininity in general, which is probably why the photo event is only available to Tifa and Aerith. On a more abstract level, the daily cycle of the sun and moon represents death and rebirth, which is a recurring motif in the game. Before we move on, it would be remiss of me not to mention the wonderful addition of alternate outfits for each of the human characters. Interestingly, despite both Cloud and Tifa having optional swimwear that exposes their torsos, neither has obvious evidence of scarring. The pair were critically injured by Sephiroth's Masamune during the Nibelheim incident, so it can only be assumed that the absence of disfigurement here is a creative decision, especially since Tifa literally shows her scar to Cloud at the end of Chapter 1. Having no luck booking a hotel room at either the Royal Coast or Costa del Sol resort, the party is soon accosted by Johnny, the red-haired moron from the Sector 7 slums who's obsessed with Tifa. In Remake, Johnny is encouraged to leave town after he inadvertently informs on Avalanche to some Shinra troopers, which is probably why Barrett doesn't trust him. Nevertheless, the lovable half-wit helps Cloud and Aerith out during the wall market sequence, and is yet another of Yuffie's Fort Condor opponents in episode intermission. It transpires that Johnny is now the owner of his very own hotel, albeit not a luxury one, and invites the group to stay. It shouldn't have come as a surprise to fans of Final Fantasy VII that Johnny appears in this part of the story. In the old game, he can be found in one of the local apartments, which he inhabits with his new girlfriend. If Tifa's not in the player's party, she will take the time to reminisce with her buddy. Alternatively, Johnny will have a short but infamous exchange with Cloud. Infamous because the English localisation explicitly states that the two were in Soldier together and childhood friends before that. It took several years for the extended media of Final Fantasy VII to confirm this was incorrect. A girl looking to win Johnny's heart has been afforded a slightly more significant role in Rebirth. Her name is Jenny, and she's encountered by Tifa and Aerith as part of the Wheelie side quest during Costa del Sol. It seems she's all too aware of Johnny's infatuation with Tifa, and even does an impression of him idolising her dark-haired heroine, but her rude attitude softens when she realises Tifa isn't competing with her. It's worth noting that Johnny's obsession is still present years later, because, according to the Denzel chapter of the official novella, On the Way to a Smile, he sets up his own cafe on the outskirts of Edge and calls it Johnny's Heaven, but spends a lot of his time telling customers about how much he admires Tifa. And if you track Johnny to the heliport, he'll admit he was ordered by Mayor Capono to assist with the luggage of a Shinra executive that has just flown in by helicopter. While the circumstances are different, this is undoubtedly a callback to a scene in the original with Rufus and Heidegger, in which a chopper arrives at the harbour's helipad to collect the president. When Cloud and Barrett first attend the beach, they spot some of the people around them giving the black-robed individuals a hard time for ruining the vibe. Barrett is quick to defend them and chase away the complaining beachgoers, which Cloud takes note of. This is yet another example of Barrett displaying protectiveness over the robes, mirroring his attempts to save them in the Mithril Mine and again on the Shinra 8. His actions matter to Cloud because he's afraid of soldier degradation and that he'll eventually become like the cloaked figures. Once the whole team has assembled on the beach, Red 13 detects a familiar, sinister scent. Professor Hojo, the Shinra executive Johnny is escorting, emerges from the crowd and stops to speak with them. As in the original game, he's fully clothed in his formal attire and lab coat, thus retaining his iconic interaction with the gang, whilst ignoring beach etiquette. Hojo reassures them that he hasn't come for Aerith, but rather for a special event. Then he remarks, one starring you perhaps. What's interesting about this is that the robed men are shown on screen when he says special show, alluding to the integration with Jenova enhanced fiends that's about to take place, but the camera angle leaves it ambiguous as to whether starring you is directed at Cloud alone or the party as a collective. In Final Fantasy VII, the group can find Hojo on the beach, surrounded by bikini-clad women, following his resignation from Shinra. It's here that Hojo first challenges whether Cloud was in Soldier and asks if he's ever felt like something is calling him, or that he had to visit some place. This of course is a reference to the Jenova cells in Cloud's body being summoned to the reunion, which may be why the robed figures were facing north at the start of this chapter. The implication in Rebirth is that Hojo is suggesting Cloud will star in the special show, should the Jenova fiends try to merge with him. This is further supplemented when Hojo inquires if Cloud had also heeded the call to join them at the staging area for his experiment, going on to label the robed figures as the young man's brothers. While walking to the private section of the beach, Hojo tells the girls accompanying him that he's in need of a few female lab assistants, and proposes that they could give birth to the world's next hero. Not only is this unbelievably creepy, it's almost certainly a reference to Lucrezia and Sephiroth. Lucrezia was Hojo's partner during the Jenova project, not to mention his wife, as confirmed in the Ultimanias, and together they conceived Sephiroth, who would eventually become the world's greatest war hero. To initiate Hojo's experiment, the Grasptropod mech rises from the shallows and unleashes a selection of Vargid Polis monsters to combine with the robes, only for drones to capture and contain the resulting necrotic entity specimens. The Grasptropod's enemy intel describes it as a Shinra robot with tentacle-like appendages, which it uses to restrain its targets. It therefore seems to fall into the recurring pattern of many-limbed weapons that are encountered across the compilation, such as the Guard Scorpion of Final Fantasy VII, the Guard Spider of Crisis Core, the Crab Warden of Remake, and the Gigantopede of Episode Intermission. Grasptropod is also a play on the word gastropod, which is a particular type of mollusk. Arguably my favourite callback in this entire sequence is Cloud grabbing a parasol to use instead of his sword. This is a direct allusion to Crisis Core, when Zack does exactly the same thing to defend the beach against some Genesis copies. Curiously, Zack's move in turn was a likely nod to his relationship with Aerith, whose novelty weapon in the old Final Fantasy VII is an umbrella. Luckily for the group, Yuffie is on hand to defeat the Grasptropod and deploys her ninjutsu magic to produce doppelgangers of Johnny. This has some unexpected consequences, but I'll come back to that in a future video. In the meantime, it's worth pointing out that Yuffie's deception tactics allow her to trick the mech into snatching her Moogle doll bombs. This is consistent with Episode Intermission and Chapter 4 of Rebirth, in which the girl conducts anti-Shinra operations while disguised in her Moogle hat. Before moving on, I'd like to backtrack a little bit and discuss the Shinra middle manager. Similar to Johnny, he's a minor character who enjoys a much larger role in this chapter, but his appearance in Costa del Sol and overall arc are true to Final Fantasy VII. If you talk to the manager on the Esplanade before heading into town, it's heavily implied that he recognises the group to be Avalanche. During Remake, he twice stands up to Barrett aboard the train, and cites the Shinra creed of working together for peace and prosperity, then later helps Tifa to protect the other passengers from slug rays targeting the eco-terrorists. I mentioned earlier in the video that the middle manager is part of the welcome committee when the Shinra 8 arrives at the resort. Believe it or not, this kinda corresponds with the old game, because he can be seen pacing atop the lighthouse that overlooks the helipad when the party first disembarks the cargo ship. A nearby sailor even remarks that all he does is play and forget about his work, despite Rufus and Heidegger being there on business. In Rebirth, this is paralleled by the manager attending the heliport to greet Hojo, but more so by his participation in the Studio de la Luna's Catch Your Caper photography event, alongside Aerith and Tifa. With each Quechua artwork the girls snap, the manager grows fonder and fonder of his prickly pals, and eventually makes explicit reference to the Shinra creed, accepting that he cannot shirk his work duties any longer. Once the quest has been completed, the middle manager thanks Aerith and Tifa for bringing some amour, or love, back into his life, and asks if he can send the Quechua photos to his wife and daughter to let them know they're always in his thoughts. It should be noted that his family lived in the Sector 7 slums, and he himself was in Wall Market the night the plate collapsed, as shown in Chapter 9 of Remake. As such, there may be a much more tragic element to his character arc than we realise. If you have a good ear, you might also have heard the ringtone to his cell phone, a track from Final Fantasy VII titled Mark of a Traitor. For Remake, however, the arrangement was renamed Shinra Creed. Following the events with Hojo and the Grasptropod, the middle manager can be found on the beach, upset because he's convinced the company is going to fire him. He decides to resign before they can do so, shouting for Rufus to shove his Mako up his ass. Once again, this accurately reflects a conversation with him at the Costa del Sol docks in the old game, where he vows to quit Shinra and criticises Rufus for acting all big. While taking a shower at Johnny's seaside resort, Aerith has another conversation with the strange, youthful voice from Chapter 4. As before, Red 13 is also present in the room, suggesting he knows who the voice belongs to. If you recall, the previous discussion related to them feeling as if the Whispers had been sucking memories from their heads, which was already happening by the climax of Remake. When Aerith emerges from the shower, she's holding her orb of white materia, only it's now void of colour. She goes on to speculate that the Whispers are responsible for draining the knowledge and memories that were contained within the materia. This is a truly ominous development, because the orb isn't simply the lone memento she has from her mother, Ifalna. The holy magic it casts could play a critical role in the survival of the planet. Furthermore, it was revealed by Rebirth's co-director, Motomu Toriyama, in Remake's Material Ultimania Plus, that Aerith's previous communication with the livestream had given her memories of the future. She even shared some of these with Red 13 to gain his trust in Chapter 16 of that game. Toriyama-san also hinted that the flashes of future events Cloud experiences in Remake are the result of his close proximity to the white materia, particularly when he meets Aerith on Loveless Street, then again in the Sector 5 church. Therefore, it's highly probable that Aerith losing her ability to access memories of the future, no matter what or who her source was, is directly connected to the empty white materia. That said, as I highlighted in the first video of this series, we do see a full white materia during the opening sequence of Rebirth, when Zack rescues Aerith from Shinra. That evening, the party retires to the beach to decompress after a turbulent few days. We are shown Tifa seated by a colourful cocktail, Aerith staring contemplatively out to sea, and a beach ball rolling towards Red 13. The latter is likely another playful joke about his association with soccer balls. Speaking with Tifa, she advises that she mixed herself a Costa del Sol cocktail, just as she used to do back at 7th Heaven. This is now the second drink we know of from the old bar's menu that was named after a destination in the game. The other is Cosmo Canyon, which has already been part of the side quest for the bartender of the Rusty Arrow in Calm. Tifa offers to make Cloud a drink, but he politely declines, saying that he promised Barrett he wouldn't have another cocktail until 7th Heaven had been rebuilt. This is a reference to the Tifa chapter of On the Way to a Smile, which tells the story of how the three of them establish a new bar together. Incidentally, Cloud's vow to Barrett also occurred in the Rusty Arrow. And finally, when you talk to Aerith, she shares a little bit about her past as a captive of Professor Hojo's, and how she despises the man. Cloud suggests that she only worries about the future when it comes, which is perhaps a nod to the renowned sequence of events in the original Final Fantasy VII between the Temple of the Ancients and the Forgotten Capital, when Aerith communes with the planet and takes matters into her own hands. Alternatively, it's a response to Aerith's scene with Red 13 about the empty white materia, and how she should handle her lost knowledge of the future. Strolling along the sand, she goes on to say, "I'll be counting on you," but clarifies that she's speaking to her future self rather than Cloud. Aerith is unsure when the two will meet, though she's certain he'll love her. As it happens, Cloud has encountered future Aerith already, during the resolution scene at her house in Remake's Chapter 14. That exchange takes place somewhere distinct from the material world, because Cloud is asleep at the time, and Aerith's form when he touches her is comprised of spirit energy. She tells Cloud not to fall in love with her, presumably to spare him the pain of her fate in the old game. It's also worth pointing out that the resolution scene in question occurs after the real-world Aerith has been taken to her so-called childhood home in Professor Hojo's lab. As for Cloud slipping into a different state of reality while dreaming, I'll definitely be revisiting this in coming chapters. Well folks, that's all for now. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I invite you to check out all future episodes on KupoCon's channel. If you're interested in the lore side of things, my own books, Norse myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII and Greek myths that inspired Final Fantasy VII, are both available on Amazon. As always, I'd especially like to thank all of KupoCon's Patreon subscribers for your continued support. Without your backing, productions such as this would not be possible. If you're not already a patron, please do consider joining for some incredible KupoCon exclusives. But for now, take care. I'm MJ Gallagher, and I'll speak to you again soon.